So this is directly related to the discussion board and your readings and videos in Module 1. There are a number of different approaches to entrepreneurship. We are focusing in this class on new venture creation and corporate entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. There are small businesses, there are family enterprise, franchise ownerships, social entrepreneur with B Corps. We're going to focus on those new ventures and corporate entrepreneurship. And the next slide. This next slide, as you see as it comes up, this is very dense. This is included here for reference. I'm not going to read this whole slide to you, nor do I expect you to read this whole slide right now. What we're touching on here is what are the legal business entities that you can start a business under. So there's sole proprietorship, limited liability corporation, often called LLC, S Corp, and C Corp. Here's what I want to say about sole proprietorship. It's the default. If you don't do anything, you are a sole proprietorship. The biggest downside with sole proprietorship is you have no legal protection. Anyone comes after the company, they're coming after you and your personal assets. Don't do that. If you're going to start a company of any type, please do something. Don't just go default with sole proprietorship. You don't want your home, your inheritance, your assets to be something that can be liable because of the company you're starting. So let's go and talk about the other three, which will be our next slide. And please feel free to go back to this. This will be posted, possibly already is posted in M1, and go back and look at that for reference. So LLC, limited liability corporation. The term, and I call this an unfortunate term, but lifestyle business is the term that's used for a vast majority of small businesses. And you're never expecting to become a large corporation. You're not expecting to get significant investment. It's usually not a particularly scalable business. So a coffee shop, a personal training outlet, if you are a personal trainer, a plumber, would be considered a lifestyle business. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be profitable. It doesn't mean that you're not going to make a fair amount of money. It's just one that relies heavily on the founder's specific skills, reputation, connections, and not one that you expect to have significant investment in. For that, you're going to choose either an LLC or an S Corp. There's not a great difference in these structures. They both protect your personal assets from liability. Both do not pay corporate entity taxes, but pass the money into your personal. You pay it as income taxes. And I'm not going to go into taxes, especially with change in tax law. You want to talk to tax attorneys about that. The one thing to keep in mind here is S Corps do have a little bit more reporting requirements. LLCs can be harder if the owners change. So if you're starting a business and you know you might change ownership, you really probably want to lean towards S Corp. If it's going to be you, and this is your business and you're going to run this, LLC is probably fine. Again, please think about not doing sole proprietorship because you don't want to open your personal assets to any liability issues. If you ever plan to get formal investment in your company, you want to be a C Corp. That's venture capitalists, that's even crowdfunding, angel investors, friends and family. We're going to be talking about all this as the course goes on. It is the most cumbersome format, although it's not humongously cumbersome. None of them are particularly cumbersome, but it's the only one that a sophisticated investor will invest in because it provides protections for both the investor and the owner. I want to have one more note here about Kickstarter and Indiegogo and other funding platforms like that. There's no preferred corporate entity for these because those people are not actually investing in your corporation. They're pre-purchasing your product. They're not getting shares for the amount they give you on Kickstarter. So back to if you're doing more lifestyle type business, you need an LLC and S Corp, you can still use Kickstarter and Indiegogo. If you're planning on being a scalable corporation, you be a C Corp, you can still be on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. A big interactive activity we're doing right now. So I just chatted out to everybody the link to Salesforce homepage. I'd like you guys to bring it up, take a look at it. And what we're going to do, we're going to go through 2 examples here, and then we're going to split you up into groups to do one on your own. We're going to take a look at the website, and we're going to fill in these 5 parts of the value prop from it. What's the value prop? What's the product? Who's the target market? Primary market? What makes their value proposition unique? All right, so everybody take a minute, take a look at Salesforce homepage. Now, you know, not everybody's website is great. Salesforce is pretty good. Website is not the only way you get these this data out to your customers, but that's just what we're going to use as a proxy right now. So let's go ahead. Yes. Use annotation. And what do you think in any one of these 5 or in all of these 5? What do you think? Use your annotation tools. Type something. 35 of you out there, don't leave me hanging. Product CRM. Value prop, unified marketing. Understand customers' needs. Good. Who are they going after? Let's go start with a broad overview. Is this a B2B product or a B2C, a business to business or a business to consumer? Enterprise, B2B. This is not actually a B2C product. This is a business to business product. This is for almost exclusively business people to keep track of their business clients. And I would put enterprise clients down in that primary market. B2B is a very broad target market. Their primary market is going to be enterprise. Certainly a lot of small companies use Salesforce, but they do tend to focus on enterprise. Unique value proposition. It's customizable and mobile. What else? What's the first thing they say? Consolidating customers. Integration.
Consolidating customer data from varied sources, including sales, customer service, etc. Okay. Great. Okay, great.
I'll clear that. You go on to the next slide. CRM solution, target market business owners and marketers. Primary, I should have said primary benefit. I didn't think we need primary market. That's our mistake. Easy to use CRM solution without compromise. Unique value proposition focuses on building a deeper relationship with your customer. That's their big tagline in the front of this page. Connect to your customers in a whole new way. Get deeper with your customers. So this is where you take the features of your product and you push on them to say, what are the pains the customer has? How do we connect those features to those pains? So the unique value proposition is much more of a pain statement or a pain reliever statement. We focus on building deeper relationships with your customers. We do it through enterprise class CRM.
Hey gang, it's Carrie, and this is our wrap-up of the 5.1 discussion board. I thought I'd take you out of the office and into my backyard to see the beauty of Steamboat Springs and change things up a little bit. So this topic of obsolete media prompted some good discussions of how things change and how they stay the same. You know, for example, an original form of marketing was word of mouth, which has never become obsolete. It's just adapted over time to new technologies like online reviews and internet influencers. As some of you pointed out, the key is matching media channels to your target market. So there are not any channels that are actually obsolete, just more targeted than they used to be and more targeted than other channels. In this vein, there was an interesting discussion of the Yellow Pages and their rebranding to YP.com. Other channels in this type of discussion included print media, direct mail, telemarketing, and radio advertising. The discussion of radio advertising took an interesting turn when different data supported both that is becoming obsolete and that is still quite relevant. We've stressed throughout the course that you don't just base your decisions on personal experience and opinion, but we haven't talked as much about how your bias can lead you to data that supports you. For example, in being contrary here, I stated that radio reaches 93% of Americans each week, a statistic that came from the research funded by the radio industry. So a corollary to us pushing you to use hard data is to look at the source of your data for reliability and also to find multiple sources of data, something we've been pushing you to do in the discussion boards. As for media channels, digital marketing is continuing to grow and become a more critical piece in most marketing plans. However, it's not replacing radio and television advertising or even direct mail and telemarketing. These mediums are more evolving than being replaced. After all, as companies prioritize personalization, technology allows them to better align the media channel with their target audience. Thanks for your hard work on the simulation presentations. Chelsea, Cheryl, and I are diving into grading those, and we appreciate the thoughtfulness with which you've approached this assignment. Don't forget to comment on the simulation Part 3 discussion board and to participate in the rational versus emotional debate discussion. And when you need a few minutes of fun, listen to the NPR Ask Me Another clip I posted in this announcement, a game about brick and mortar stores that have gone under.
So what financial values are most important to be tracking now? Most important is subjective. You may choose more than one. And almost have everybody. 3, 2, 1. And share. There we go. Now you should all be able to see them. Cash flow. Somebody learned something from the first module, which is great. Cash flow can kill you before you get a chance to do any of the rest of those. I'm going to hopefully share a few of my secrets with you. Googling the competitor's website. Please, everyone, see what your competitor's marketing is, but that still only shows you what their outside facing is. What you really want an insight to, if you can, once you have that, is where are they planning to go and what's going on inside the company. One of the things I used to do, it's not quite as effective now as it used to be, was call customer support, pretend to be a customer, and ask about features that we're planning to do to find out if they're planning to do them. It's not quite as effective because a lot of companies' customer support is outside their company now. But if you can find out whether a company's customer support is inside the company, a little bit closer, a lot of times they put tech support people on product teams because it's a way to bring people along professionally, but they forget to tell them, don't tell our customers about things we haven't announced. Possibly because you're speaking to your competitors, not your customers. So there's one tricky one. I had a fake company I would use for that. Presentations by competitors. Well, would we be giving them our ideas? Probably, if you are thinking of features that a competing product could add, they probably already know it. And you're talking to some pretty low-level people. But it's possible, but honestly, embrace the notion that any single idea you have for your company is not going to be what makes or breaks it. If it has to be and you have to keep it quiet, it's a whole different type of company and it's very difficult to do. Right? If it's going to be the full execution, the full delivery that differentiates. Presentations by competitors. Looking for where they were presenting at conferences or other industry things, or just searching for presentations. One great thing that can be used for competitors that can also be used for finding email addresses for people you want to connect with. People, when they give a presentation, will often put their email address in it, even if you can't find their email address another way. News. So the reason I say research companies in news stories or research your industry in news stories is that news stories will often quote portions of those reports that you can't afford. And it might just be the data that you need. And then you can quote it from the news story and you're fine. You can source it from the news story. So the other thing about those reports that you may not be able to afford from somewhere like Gartner is if you go to them, they have a table of contents, they give you an overview. Sometimes you can get the data you need from the bit that they'll release to entice you to buy. And startups, especially if you're looking at startups, you can't use annual reports because they don't do annual reports. So there's a website called Crunchbase and one called AngelList. Crunchbase I find extremely helpful. They can let you, both those sites can give you insight onto whether the startup has received funding and what funding they received and when they last received funding. They can give you an idea of where they are in their cycle and so what you're competing against. All right. Marketing. So to talk about startup marketing, let's first define marketing. That's the activity of communicating products and services to customer. These are all examples of marketing, and I'll touch on some of these. Not all of these are appropriate for startup marketing. Dr. Miller's new favorite slide. So let's remember the definition of a startup, right? And the key here is extreme uncertainty. Established companies market for growth in their known target market. Startup companies do not. What startup companies do is search for product market fit, right? And that's finding the product and features you need to build for a large target market that cares, with a business model required to entice that audience. Right? So the search for product market fit, which you're doing some now in development, you're doing it with customer discovery, you do it with marketing also. Right? It's a very different goal than why you would run a Super Bowl ad, which is to market for growth. So the marketing must also be different. So a quick review of the fundamental feedback loop of lean startup: build a small product or service, measure, test with real customers, learn, take the results of your test and roll it back into the product, either to pivot or to persevere. I bring that up because there is a corresponding lean startup marketing cycle. Looks very much the same. Use that same fundamental feedback loop. Create a minimum viable marketing campaign, small and fast marketing to test your target market and your messaging and your channel hypotheses. Measure those campaigns, learn from the results and iterate. In the middle of this loop are the customers, right? Probably don't need to say very much about this. You're all doing this in discovery now, but startup marketing is very akin to what you are doing in customer discovery. Learning about your market, finding that product market fit. The customer has to be in the middle of your startup marketing. So your goals for startup marketing: target market definition with detail. Right? You're going to do some, you're going to start closing down, but in the marketing, you can actually gather quite a bit more detail. Create key marketing messages that will resonate with the target market. You're going to test your messages. Really easy to have those resonate with each other in the company. Making sure that they actually resonate with the customer is harder to do. And you're going to learn which marketing channels fit your target market. So I'm going to explore a few more of these. Just going to touch a little on the target market. This is one thing you can do with your customer discovery, and then you can start adding to it, which is personas. Right? Who is your customer? What do they look like, feel like, act like? Lean towards putting too much detail in these. These are internal. They're not anything you're ever going to share outside of the company, but different parts of the company will use them in different ways. So capture everything you can. You can go as far as having, physical representations, whatever you guys need to communicate it. But that's a great sort of goal to get to. Okay, marketing messages. Start marketing second goal with learning the customers to create the key marketing messages. And I'm sure you've all heard of feature benefit analysis, what the feature does in a product and what's the benefit to the user. I like to push that farther, and we've talked about this a little bit. I like to get all the way to the pain. What's the customer-centric I statement of the pain that the customer is feeling that the feature and the benefit address? So one of your, the individual assignment this week starts with this, that you're going to fill out a feature benefit pain statement for your venture, and hopefully multiple features and benefits, multiple pain statements. Then you're going to take one of those I statements, you're going to build a small marketing campaign around it. So we sports fans right now, we are going to do a 2-minute drill on this. I have put up, what I've put up? 6 products, a feature from each product, and a benefit of that feature. But what I want you to do individually, we're just going to stay in the room here for 2 minutes, is come up with an I statement for one of those. If 2 minutes is too long, come up with I statements for multiples of those. That's fine. I don't like to carry a camera. I have a hard time getting my kids to eat. Absolutely. I want to watch that works out with me. these I statements are usually very emotional. I want to capture memories. The more sort of emotional you can hit with those, the better you're going to be able to connect with your customers. So to recap what we just did, startup marketing exists in an environment of extreme uncertainty. So it's focused on product market fit, not on growth. That means you need to do different activities. Build, measure, learn, just like lean development. We're going to do that with the target market, the messaging, and the channels. Customers at the center. We want to listen to them. The more fun part about this is the implementation. Right? Once we have an idea of the target market, once we know some marketing messages we want to test and some channels we want to test, then we get to do that with implementation. So I'm going to talk about brand and the rest of these things: web presence, Facebook and Google ads, content marketing. So are there any questions? And I keep losing chat here. There we go. Are there any questions about sort of the approach to startup marketing, how it's different than sort of established company marketing or anything like that, what the lean cycle is? All right, let's go on to implementation. So brand is more than your logo, it's more than your colors, it's the sum of everything. When Dr. Miller talks about your founding team and your company culture, that will end up getting its way into your brand and how people feel about your brand. It's just something, it's both something to remember as you implement, but it's also something to remember that you can't push the speed on branding. You can't become a brand. It is the sum of what you do. Web presence, SEO. You must have a web presence. Especially now during the pandemic, when your in-person presence is restricted, your website, messaging, visuals, content, all come from the customer discovery you're doing and from the learning you're doing. I have resources on the slide on where you can make a website. I just want to point out that Kickstarter and Indiegogo can certainly be your first web presence. It doesn't have to be a traditional website. And now I'm going to say something a little more controversial. Don't waste your money or your time on SEO, search engine optimization, until you have product market fit. Okay? It doesn't mean that you ignore how search engines see your website. I'll get to that in just a minute. But if you have large competitors or you're going into a really crowded space, your startup will not have the resources to beat them at SEO. It'll just drain resources and time that you need to be focusing on. Who are my customers? Am I delivering the right product? Am I delivering the right message? If you are really unique and you're in sort of a different space, the SEO is going to happen organically, right? So what I meant by don't ignore them is that you need good website hygiene. So ensure that your site works on all devices. Use your personas and your key marketing messages to create good content. Refresh your content often. Have appropriate links to other sites and have such compelling content that other sites will link to you. And make sure you do the paperwork on your web pages, keywords, meta tags, alt text to your images. That all of those things give the search engine something to crawl for and some reason to move your site up. But it's really not worth it to spend your time and money on SEO at the beginning. Facebook and Google ads. Once you've identified your initial target market or where you want to try to go in and you have some key messages, Facebook and Google ads are great. They're a great way to market. They're very measurable. You can point them at very specific target customers. You can control the cost of the campaign. They're also great places to do what's called A/B testing. Give one message to a portion of the customers and a different message to another portion and measure how well those resonate. Social media, content marketing, social media. In startup marketing, you need to educate your customers about your product, about your company, and about how you're different from your competitors. All right, so focus on educational content, and again, refreshing that content often to keep customers coming back. And I just want to say, you want to match your social media outlets to your target market, right? You'll find me on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find my kids who are in their 20s on TikTok and Twitch. If you're startups aimed at corporates, LinkedIn might be more appropriate. So think about a target market, what channels are most appropriate, and test, right? You can put the same message out on 6 social media channels and see where it gets more play. Event marketing, a little harder to do right now with the pandemic. I think they're starting to open a little more, but you can still do these as Zoom to Zoom events. I can't emphasize the importance of face-to-face in some way with your customers. You will decide that your messages are fabulous. You're going to work together in your team. You're going to argue about it. You're going to come up with these great messages, and nothing will mean more than when you actually try to deliver it, because some of you will be able to say the messages you create inside, and some of you will not be able to deliver them that way. And then you'll see in someone's eyes whether they get it or they don't. So event marketing early on can really, really be helpful. With Ugraka, we went to a ton of these little events. Email marketing, very much like Facebook and Google ads, you can be very targeted, especially if you can get good lists. Very measurable, you can control your costs. And I strongly suggest use something like Constant Contact or MailChimp, even when you're very focused on keeping your costs down. They are quite low cost to use. I think it's 0.001 cent per email. And not only do you get better insight, but they ensure that you follow the Can Spam Act, which is a huge pet peeve of mine. You have to have an address, you have to have an unsubscribe. You have to follow that unsubscribe. So if you send someone an email and they unsubscribe, you can't send them another email. And those companies can make sure you do that all right. And then influencer marketing. It's so tempting to do influencer marketing early, especially with a consumer product, and especially if it's aimed at younger people. But I'm going to caution you here, sort of like SEO. You have less control and you have less visibility in terms of being able to measure with influencer marketing than with other types of marketing. If it happens organically, that's great. Be prepared to support it. But influencer marketing should really be thought of more as a growth way than as a product market fit activity.